Welcome to Bloodstained Backstories, the show where we peel back the curtains on the darkest chapters of human history, exploring the killers, the crimes, and the disturbing truth that hide in the shadows. I'm your host Jace, and today we're diving into one of the most infamous cases in true crime. One that not only shocked the quiet town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, but also carved its way into American pop culture forever. This is the story of Ed Gein, known as the Butcher of Plainfield, a man whose crimes were so grotesque, so unimaginable, that they blurred the lines between fact and horror fiction. Gein wasn't just a murderer, he was a grave robber, a collector of the macabre, and a twisted inspiration behind characters like Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. So grab a seat, dim the lights if you dare, and join me as we uncover the bloodstained backstory of Ed Gein. Ed Gein has been called a real-life Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. But unlike these fictional characters, Gein's story is horrifyingly real. Although he was only convicted of murdering 2 women, what truly made him infamous was what came after. He was a body snatcher, a grave robber who desecrated the resting places of dozens of corpses in Plainfield, Wisconsin, and he turned their bones and skin into lampshades, masks, and furniture. Ed Gein was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin on August 27, 1906 to George and Augusta Gein. He had one brother, Harry, who was 5 years older. Augusta was a devout Lutheran, deeply religious to the point of fanaticism. She believed that the world was filled with sin, especially sexual immorality and women of loose morals. Every afternoon she read the Bible to her boys, but instead of parables or psalms, she focused on the Old Testament and the Book of Revelations, emphasizing on death, damnation, and divine retribution. Ed adored his mother, idolizing her, clinging to her every word. That unhealthy attachment became the center of his world. George, Ed's father, was less influential. He struggled with alcoholism and drifted between jobs. He was a carpenter, tanner, and even running a grocery store for a short while. Eventually, he sold the store, and the family moved to a 155-acre farm outside of Plainfield. The Geins were isolated. Augusta discouraged her sons from making friends, and if Ed tried, she punished him. Teachers would describe Ed as shy and strange. He sometimes laughed out loud in class as though there were jokes that no one else could hear. Socially, he was awkward. Academically, he did fairly well, especially in reading. At home, Augusta's word was the law. She believed outsiders were evil. She wanted her sons bound to her, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And for Ed, that's exactly what happened. And this is where one of the horror movies, Psycho, was born, with Norman Bates and the obsession of his mother. On August 1st, 1940, Ed's father George died of heart failure at the age of 66. Afterward, Ed and Henry supported themselves doing odd jobs around town. They were considered dependable workers. Ed babysat for neighbors and often seemed more comfortable with children than adults. Henry, though, tried to break free from his mother's grip. He dated a divorced woman who had 2 children and was frequently criticized by Augusta and Ed. Sometimes that shocked him and upset him. And then in 1944, tragedy would struck. Ed and Henry were burning bush on the farm when the fire got out of control. The fire department came, put it out, and left. Later, Ed reported Henry missing. Searchers would then find Henry lying dead on the ground. Though his body was unburned, there were strange bruises on his head. Officially, his cause of death was listed as heart failure, and no autopsy was ever completed, but that is very suspect. Mary suspected that Henry's death was not an accident, and that Henry is actually Ed's first kill. Years later, Augusta would have a stroke, and Ed would care for her tirelessly, but she suffered another stroke, and her health declined rapidly. She would die on December 29, 1945, at the age of 67. For Ed, her death was catastrophic. He had lost the one person he loved, feared, and depended on completely. He boarded up her rooms in the farmhouse, leaving them up as shrines. He retreated into a small, filthy room, but the kitchen surrounded stacks of pulp magazines and books about Nazis, cannibalism, and human experiments. It was around this time that Ed began to slip deeper into darkness. Though Ed is confirmed to have murdered 2 women, many suspect that he killed more. His first known victim is Mary Hogan, a 51-year-old tavern owner in Pine Grove, about 10 miles from Plainfield. Mary was the opposite of Augusta. She was brash, foul-mouthed, and independent, and she ran the Pine Grove Tavern and was well known in the community. On December 8, 1954, Mary would disappear. Bloodstains were found in her tavern, but there were no signs of her. Locals joked about her vanishing, and some even teased Ed about it. One time he replied chillingly, "She's not missing. She's at my house right now." And people laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. 3 years later, on November 16, 1957, Ed strikes again. Bernice Worden was a 58-year-old woman who ran the Plainfield hardware store. She was well respected in the community, known for her kindness. That morning, deer hunting season was in full swing, so the store was quiet. The last receipt in her register showed a sale of antifreeze to none other than Ed. Her son, Frank Worden, a deputy sheriff, entered the store that evening and found blood on the floor and the cash register missing. He immediately suspected Ed. Police would arrest Ed later that day, and when they searched his farm, what they found would leave them in disbelief. Inside the farmhouse, investigators uncovered a nightmarish collection. Human skulls used as bowls, furniture upholstered in human skin, masks made of female faces, a belt decorated with human nipples, Bernice Wooden's head in a burlap sack, Mary Hogan's face in a paper bag, the lampshades, wastebaskets, and clothing made from skin, boxes of organs including Bernice's plastic heart near his stove, skulls on his bedpost, a corset made from a female torso skinned from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, 9 vulvas in a shoebox, a young girl's dress, and the vulvas of 2 females judged to have been about 15 years old, 4 noses, a pair of lips on the window shade drawstrings, fingernails from female. The farmhouse was filthy, decaying food, clutter, filth everywhere, except for Augusta's preserve room, which remained spotless. Ed confessed that after his mother's death, he visited gravesites at night, exhuming freshly buried women that he thought would resemble his mother. Between 1947 and 1952, he admitted to making at least 40 trips, though he claimed he often left empty-handed. On other nights, he brought home bodies, skinned them, and used their parts to make what he would call a woman suit. He wanted to become his mother, literally, by wearing her skin. Though Ed was only convicted of 2 murders, authorities questioned him about several other disappearances. Georgia Jean Weckler, who was 8 years old, vanished in 1947 after school. She was last seen by her mailbox, and witnesses reported seeing a dark sedan that is similar to Ed's car. Evelyn Hartley, who was 14, disappeared in 1953 while babysitting. A father found the house locked, her shoes and broken glass scattered inside, and signs of a struggle. Despite massive searches, she was never found. Victor Travis and Raymond Burgess, 2 hunters, went missing in 1952 after stopping at a bar near Plainfield. James Walsh, who was a neighbor, vanished in 1954. Afterward, Ed did chores for his widow. Irene Keating, 30, disappeared in 1956 under mysterious circumstances. While Ed denied the involvement, and some evidence was circumstantial, many believe that he had killed more than the two women officially tied to him. Ed was arraigned on the murder of Bernice Worden and pled guilty, but pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. He was declared mentally unfit and sentenced to state hospital. In 1968, after years of treatment, doctors would rule him competent. His trial lasted just 1 week. The court would find him guilty of Bernice Worden's murder and legally insane, but he was committed to mental institutions. Psychologists testified about his obsessions of his mother and necrophilia and schizophrenia. One psychiatrist stated, Mr. Gein's actions stemmed from opioid fixation on his mother, his grave robbing, his wearing women's skins, and his attempts to literally become Augusta again. Ed admitted he would enter cemeteries in a daze, sometimes claimed he snapped it out of it. Other times he dug up the dead. During the testimony, Sheriff Arthur Shirley broke down describing the farmhouse. I do not believe I'll ever forget that as long as I live. What we saw inside, no human being should ever see. Staff at the hospital later described it as quiet, polite, and even helpful. One nurse said, if all our patients were like Ed, we'd have no trouble at all. But others admitted feeling uneasy under his unblinking stare. Ed died on July 26, 1984, of lung cancer at the age of 77. He was buried in Plainfield Cemetery between his parents and brother. His gravestone was stolen in 2000 and then later recovered and is now kept in storage. Ed's farmhouse was set to be auctioned, but before it could be sold, it mysteriously burned down. Arson was suspected but never proven, and when asked about it, Ed struggled and said, just well. His car, the one that he used to haul the bodies, was started at a carnival sideshow for just $760. People paid 25 cents to see it. Ed's crimes seared themselves into American culture. He became the twisted inspiration behind many iconic villains, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Ed was more than just a killer. He was a man whose obsessions, shaped by a controlling mother and a life of isolation, turned into a nightmare that spilled from graveyards into the farmhouse and eventually into the world of horror fiction. He may have lived in a small town of Wisconsin, but the legacy of his crimes reached far beyond Plainfield, into every store, every character, and every film that still chills us to this day. And this wraps up our deep dive of Ed Gein. Thank you for joining us as we explore the dark corners of human history and human behavior. If you found this episode gripping, or maybe even a little too creepy, make sure you hit that like button, share this episode with other true crime enthusiasts, and subscribe so you never miss another Bloodstained Backstory. Until next time, stay curious and stay careful.